Hello and a warm welcome again to feelingTERrific. Today I have another special guest as always, so as last week and the week before and probably the next week after today. So I have today with me David Kingsley, a colleague or maybe an ex-colleague. So thank you for your time. He is currently Chief People Officer at Intercom. And I hope it's okay for you, but I was used during our time at Alteryx that we used to call you LDK. Is it still valid or is it something different?
It is.
Perfect. Yeah, so today we will talk about different topics, right? Among them, the importance of approachability in leadership. And I think that's quite an important but also quite present topic. So thank you for taking the time for this one, and hope to have a good conversation and authentic insight.
Excellent. Well, Christian, thank you so much for having me. First of all, it's great to reconnect, and we are not former colleagues. We are current and always and forever colleagues. I think there are certain people who you get to work with in your career that you meet and interact with, and you say, I want to stay connected to that person my whole career because of the way they show up, the way they do their job, the way they show up to the world. And you're certainly one of those people. And so I want to say thank you for having me on, and thank you for what you're doing with your podcast or your video podcast. I'm feeling terrific just being here, joining you, and just very grateful for what you're doing to kind of advance the discussion on these important topics across all the different topics that you're covering with your guests. I think the more that we make these things discussable, even the hard topics, the better we're going to be as leaders. And for those of us who are in people, roles, our job is to be of service. Full stop. That's it. That's our whole job, is to be of service to the companies and the people and the stakeholders that we're aligned with in our different companies and organizations. So the extent to which this dialogue drives that forward is the right way for us to be spending time, and I'm grateful for it. So thank you.
That's an interesting and right perspective, I would say. So thank you also for that. Maybe let's start with the most important question. Maybe not the most important one, but the most difficult one. Who are you?
Who am I? Well, my name is David Kingsley. I go by LDK or David or LD, and my pronouns are he, him. And the most important way I describe myself is I am the spouse and partner to Erin, my wife, and I am the father to Jack and Kate and Maddie, our three wonderful children, and Birdie, our French bulldog. So my self-identity and my self-worth comes from the role that I play in our family. And the rest of my life aligns up to support and enable that. But my most important identity are those jobs of being a spouse and partner to Erin and the best dad that I can be to our kids. So that's how I define myself. In terms of how I add value to the world outside of our home, I'm the Chief People Officer, as you said, at Intercom. And I describe myself, Christian, and you probably remember me saying this, is I'm an analyst who got old and lost his hair. And I always think of myself that way. I think of myself as one of the team, as part of the team. And that's my calling in life, is to be in people organizations and be helping to advance the discipline and the dialogue in the people space.
Yeah, no, I can really echo that. When we work together, and as you also mentioned, you have the feeling when someone is genuine, and this is quite it's quite rare, to be honest. And so I'm also happy that we still are in contact, right? So in this regards,
absolutely.
Maybe let's have a look at your job as Chief People Officer, right? So how did you end up in HR in general?
It's interesting. I'm a recovering consultant in terms of my career. So I started out at what was then Anderson Consulting, and then became Accenture, and then moved into work with Booz Allen. So I was in consulting the first 13 years of my career, and I was in the organization design, human performance space. So we were helping clients going through times of significant technology change in their organizations. And most of the time there was an organizational component to that, and oftentimes a culture change in their organizations, moving from what was a more analog world into a more digital world. And that was in the late 90s, early 2000s. And you remember Y2K, that had us all scared that all of our, ATM money machines were going to go down and the world was going to come to a screeching halt. So a lot of the work, frankly, we were doing was around, not only Y2K, but also the aftermath of that, as businesses said, we really need to get much more digital. and really take advantage of a lot more of the computing power that's coming on the scene with regard to the technology and software that we can use. And in the case of consultants, we were doing enterprise resource planning software, ERP software. So it was financial software, human resources software, and then the corresponding org designs and change management communications that went along with that. So without knowing it, I was preparing myself for the second chapter of my career, being in HR proper, and then joined Salesforce to be the HR business partner lead for the sales organization. And that was my first foray into HR proper. That really got me thinking about, what's my North Star, or if you're down in Australia, what's my Southern Cross for my career, or as I redefine the second chapter of my career. And that really came to be, I'd like to serve in the role of a chief people officer. And so I'm doing that, I think, for the third or fourth company now, which is a real pleasure and an honor to be able to do this job. I pinch myself every day, saying I get to do this job. This is, I think, the best job in the world, that we get to be of service to people as they build their careers and transform their lives. And it starts everything from talent identification and acquisition that you and I worked on together, all the way through to learning and development and helping people grow in their careers in the organizations. So I ended up in HR sort of in a circuitous way, I suppose, but still in a way that I think was the right path for me, which kind of goes along my whole career philosophy of, when you start out your career, you have an idea of what you're going to be, and chances are that's probably not what you're going to be.
Yeah, I think being aware of that, or open-minded at least, that the maybe second or third half of your career might be different, right? But maybe adding to that, from the first half of your career, right? What did you learn? What was helpful or is helpful for you now?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've brought into the HR world that I bring from consulting is the idea of being in service to your client and defining your value, or the people organization's value, HR's value, in the lens of our clients, and our clients being the CEO, his or her executive team, and the leaders in the organization, all the way to frontline managers. How are they defining success for the organization? And then how are the employees in the company defining success for themselves? Then we as a people organization line up and align with those values and those visions that our clients have. End of the day, we can run the most wonderful programs in HR as possible and think we've done a wonderful job. And if our clients go, I don't know, that really didn't quite serve me in the way I wanted to be served, we've missed the mark. And so I think I've brought that forward from consulting, that the client's agenda is our agenda. Yeah.
Also combined with that, would you agree with, or when I say that change management is on top of everything all day long?
It is, and I think that we're creatures of habit. And if there's one thing the last couple 3 years has taught us is, when our world gets shaken a little bit, people react in different ways, and each of those ways is valid and real and true for those people. At the same time, there's not one way that we can say, oh, if we do this, then everyone's going to react this way, or if I say it this way, then everyone's going to understand. Everyone is on a very unique and individual and personal change journey. Anytime we're faced with any change at all, whether it's a small change that someone moved the tea from one part of the pantry to the next, and you got to go kind of adjust how you put your tea together in the morning, or something on the road when you're driving to work, commuting to the office for those people who are going to offices, or an organizational change where someone gets a new leader or a new boss or a new strategy comes on board. Every one of us has to react to those changes. The larger scale they are, the more toll that takes on us as humans. And I don't think we realize that or appreciate that as much as we do now, having gone through the pandemic as a society, as a peoplehood, to know how that affects each other. And so I think we're especially more sensitive to that now, about each person goes through a change journey on their own pace and their own scale. And we as leaders, and certainly we in people organizations, have to be mindful and sensitive to that.
Yeah. That's basically a perfect intro to my next question, right? So what is it that drives you or keeps you doing a leadership role, especially in hard times?
I got asked that question the other day, and I'll tell you, it comes in these micro moments that aren't so micro actually at all. And it usually comes in the form of a text message or an email. And it comes from someone, sometimes, from literally 20 years back. And I just got one the other day that was 19 years ago. all the way to, a year or two ago, where somebody reaches out and says, hey, I just wanted to keep you updated. I'm doing this thing now. And when you challenged me in this way, in that role at that company or that organization, that gave me reason to develop myself in a new way, or challenge my thinking, or grow in a way that I didn't know that I could. And that just warms my heart. I mean, I get goosebumps just thinking about it, that when somebody says that was an important inflection point in my career that mattered, and I've had those myself, and I've tried to reach out to my mentors and my former bosses as much as anybody else to say thank you and reflect upon those things. Those are those moments that remind me of why I do what I do. That if I can help other people come along their journey through some observation or counsel or challenge that I can set someone up with, then I'm doing the right thing. And that's how I define success in that. And that's what drives me forward, because you never know when that moment's going to come with somebody in a critical conversation where they say, you know what, I needed that push, or, I needed to hear that someone believed in me in a way that I hadn't heard before. And if we can do that authentically as a leader, as a colleague, then we're going to be of service to that person.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you. Maybe a personal example from my side. So last year I had also quite a down, right? And when I had this down, I mean, it's all connected with what you just said, right? Then, I mean, you can work on your intrinsic motivation and so on, right? But sometimes you just need an external push or an external input, right? Mm-hmm. And what was kind of a key moment coming or rising up again out of this down phase was the sentence or the phrase, Christian, remember why you were hired. You were hired for a reason. Mm-hmm. And alone this sentence, there I could get goosebumps, And
mm-hmm.
Sometimes you just need external input.
Yeah, I agree. And finding those phrases or those things that you can reach back to that remind you of your value, of your worth, and whether it's something you've told yourself or someone's told you. And I love that phrase. You're absolutely right. And I've thought about that. Anytime we have to part ways with an employee doing the job that we do, whether it's because of a reduction in force or some other factor, I've oftentimes said to my teams, my leaders, there was a reason we hired that person. There was a reason that we extended them an offer, and I promise you that when we got them to say accept, we forwarded that note around to the team, and we all said high five and congratulations, and aren't we excited? So let's remember that moment as we're saying farewell to that person, that we respect that moment that we had with them on the front end of their journey with our organization, and send them forth into the world knowing that value that they have. And I think it's a really important point you just made.
Yeah, you also just mentioned kind of self-reflection, right? So what would you say, how important is that also in regards to personal development?
I think self-reflection can be a really kind of scary space, because we have a society that many parts of it tell us you're great, you're good, you're perfect, don't change, you be you. It's this affirmation. And I think a lot of it just candidly, comes from the US tech market that developed over the last, 10, 12 years, this almost irrational exuberance about the market. And the nature of capital and the ease with which capital could be obtained and the cost of money was very low. And so there got to be in the space this very kind of wide-eyed, bright-eyed sense of the future and of the world, and everything's going to be perfect and great all the time. And I love that optimism. I think that's a good thing to have. I'm an optimistic person by nature, and I like to believe that I see the good in people, in the world, and in situations. And the last 6 months, I think, have reminded us that the world and business goes through cycles. And there are times when companies need to really take stock of how they're doing, how they're delivering for their stakeholders and their shareholders, and be very clear-eyed about that in a very direct way. So too, I think, do we need to do that as people with ourselves? How am I doing in my quiet moment? Am I leading in the way that I should? Am I showing up in the way that I should? Am I putting the energy and effort in the right ways into my work? And much of the time, I think for most of us, certainly for myself, you can find at least one thing that you could be doing better. And maybe no one else knows it. Maybe your boss is saying, you're doing the best job in the world. You're great. Here's a raise, here's a promotion. And in your quiet moment, you're going, you know what? I want to be reflective about this. And I want to identify what's that thing that I can do just a little bit better, even if no one else sees it. And making sure to make the space for that and hold ourselves accountable for it. And that's hard because it's taking that input from the world and the way we want to feel about ourselves, that we're doing really well and we're just operating, perfectly, and really saying, but am I though? And really being sincere and authentic. I think it's those people that take the time to do that. And it's something I'm really trying to work on myself, are the ones who are going to be the best for their organizations and their stakeholders.
Yeah. Would you agree when I summarize it as you have to have the mindset of a business owner in order to self-reflect, to be accountable, or having the mindset of I want to be accountable, also dealing with it proactively?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I think if you put yourself in the eyes of a small business owner, I come from a family of business people on both sides, my wife's family and mine, and I think that when you're owning a business and running a business at a smaller scale, every decision you make can matter to the bottom line and can even matter to the success and longevity of the business itself. When you're in a large organization, decisions matter, of course. A wrong decision you can correct in a quarter, next fiscal year, you can overcome it. A mistake at the micro level in a smaller business or smaller organization can be, highly impactful, if not catastrophic. And so I think thinking about yourself like a business owner, you own that part of the business. And what if my business depended on this decision I'm going to make? And there were implications beyond what I can see now. Being really thoughtful about that and contemplative about that to make sure that it's something that we are taking the time and giving the energy that it deserves. Each decision, each conversation, each moment, and being very planful and thoughtful about how we're executing that.
Yeah. Maybe also one more thing regarding self-development. I'm curious, what are you working on at the moment?
The thing that I'm working on at the moment is contextualizing the way that actually I interact with our children in the face of my work. And so I'll give you the example. This was last week. Our daughter, Kate, I was leaving for the office. I have a little office that I come to every day. It helps me kind of separate work and family kind of a little bit. And so leaving for the office, I had a meeting that was coming up, and I had just about enough time to get to the office, just like right on the money there in the morning. And Kate said to me, she said, "Daddy, will you come sit with me?" And my normal reaction, my response would be, "Honey, I've got a meeting and Daddy's got to go to work." And something in me just said, "Stop. Just go sit with her on the couch." And she wanted to show me one of her dolls or something, And I was sitting there for maybe 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes. Not a long time. They don't have long attention spans, these little ones. Right? They move on to the next thing quickly. But what she was saying to me in that moment was, "Daddy, I need you. I need your attention." And when I say to her, "I've got to go to work," that says to her, my work is more important than you are to me. And I hadn't really thought about that until that moment when I just caught myself and said, "Yes, I'll sit with you." And I got to work, and I was actually on time for the meeting. But what if I were 2 minutes late to the meeting? And I said to the people I was meeting with, "Hey, I was a couple minutes late at home, help them with the kids." Like, pretty much everybody's going to go, okay. Even if they don't have kids, they understand that. Or if they don't, then that's probably not an organization or a team that I want to be a part of, who can't respect that we have other things outside of work that matter to us. So I'm trying to be reflective about how do I contextualize my work with my life. And don't get me wrong, we all work extraordinarily hard at our jobs, and this laptop is open and running, probably more hours than I'd like it to be, but that's okay. It's important work that I enjoy. But it's also making the time and space for the other things in life that make life rich in addition to work. And so I'm really working on that. It's something that I don't think I've spent enough time on as a professional, as a parent, that I need to get better at, and our kids deserve that. And frankly, it's the role modeling I think that I need to do also as a leader, to say to our team and our organization, what you have outside of work matters. Whether that's you and I've talked about this, whether it's your plants or your pets or your people or your places, your 4 Ps, whatever those things are that matter to you, that make your life rich, you should make time and space for those things, and know that you will be respected inside of the organization to make that time for those.
Yeah. No, so first, I would say congratulations for the self-reflection. I don't know if congratulations is the right word for it, but I think it's really good and an important milestone also in someone's life, whatever it might be, right? For some, it might be the children, the family, or whatever, right? But on the other side, you also just mentioned it, when it comes to leadership, then, I mean, it's a perfect example for kind of the title, right? When you are 2 minutes too late, for example, to a meeting, and you say, I was just having this discussion with my kid or whatsoever, it's making you approachable, right? Because at the end, I think nobody wants to work for a robot or for someone who just cares about numbers and so forth, right? I mean, of course, at the end, we are working for companies who want to earn money, right? But when people leave, they leave because of people, because of the leader. And not because of the company. So approachability, this is a perfect example.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that we all want to know that our boss sees us first as a human being and second as a factor of production. And I think when we as leaders forget that we see our team just as, the pieces of a machine, that's when those moments come when a recruiter reaches out and says, hey, I want to talk to you about xyz.com. They're just launching, and the person goes, tell me more. And you never know when that last conversation with your team member is going to happen, and they get that outreach, the next call from a recruiter, and they take that call. So every conversation matters, every meeting matters, every email matters, and just being mindful of that and how we're showing up first as humans, and then second as business people.
Yeah. Maybe last thought regarding personal development. What do you think about the role being patient in personal development?
I had my former CEO, Mark. He taught me something really important, and he had a phrase for it. He said, "I think we should let a few more cards turn over." And just that image, and I don't know how to gamble. I would be very bad in Vegas trying to make money, but I know the concept generally of when you're playing cards at a card table and there are cards that get turned over as part of the game. And if you make a decision before you've seen enough cards, you could make a sub-optimized decision. And so Mark was really good at, kind of modeling that patience for me and with me, and also giving me that visual of like, okay, so you've seen one or two cards. Let's wait for two more cards to turn over, and then let's see what happens. And maybe we look back and we say, okay, we should have made the decision one card earlier. I think that's preferable than saying, gosh, I don't think I had enough information before I made the decision. Now, there are plenty of other thinkers out there who say, look, if you wait until you're fully secure in a decision, you've waited too long. So I think there's a healthy balance there we've got to keep in mind, that you don't want to be the kind of leader who just waits forever and asks for every input under the sun before they make a decision. You have to trust your instincts and be able to pattern match. At the same time, patience to know when the right moment is to make that decision is really important. And I think as we go through our careers, we develop more patience because we've seen more things happen. And we can anticipate what may come next because of what we've seen before. And we know how long to wait until we make a decision or make a call on something. And as Mark would say, wait for a couple of those cards to turn over.
Yeah. No, that's a good perspective. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Maybe regarding approachability in leadership per se, right? So I still remember when you joined in the previous company where we both worked, right? You took 30 minutes to talk to everyone within the HR organization, right? And I still think it's quite impressive, and it's also quite rare. Did you do this again? Or why did you do this in the first place?
Yeah, it's sort of, I guess it's become kind of a repeated element for me. The first time I did it, it was a smaller team, a few companies ago. And I learned so much. I learned so much about where people were from, what they were doing, what was going on in the organization. Like I was just in listening mode and onboarding mode. And so I've done that the last few companies to include here at Intercom. And the teams have gotten larger. So now it's, upwards of 60, 70, 80, 100 people I'm doing that with. And when I tell my EA, my executive assistant, that we're going to do this, usually their eyes get very big and they're like, you're going to do 100 30-minute meetings. And I say, in 1 month. They say, how are you going to do that? And I say, with your help. And so we set those up, and it's, we kind of stack them back to back. And obviously you're working on time zones. So if you have Asia Pacific, and Japan and the Americas and EMEA, you're doing some calls early and some calls later in the evening. But with, the proper focus, I think it can be done. And again, two things come out of that. Most importantly, I think the person you're meeting with really feels heard and seen, and they know that you know who they are. And I think that's the most important thing, that this leader acknowledges me and knows me and knows my name and knows a little bit about me, A. And then B, I as a leader learn a lot about the organization, about the people, about the culture, about the cultural norms, the way people talk about the company, the way people talk about the work. There's no better onboarding I think a leader can do than to spend time with their team. At the same time, I've gotten, feedback about that. And, people said, wait a second, you're spending that much time that early. You should be meeting with, the senior executives, blah, 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 blah. Yes, of course. I will, of course, meet with my senior executive colleagues and my clients effectively. At the same time, though, if we're going to serve them as a people organization, we have to be collectively serving them as a people organization. And if I don't know the people in the organization and what we're doing, then I'm not going to be able to, kind of serve that in a leadership role very effectively. So I think it's time well spent. And I'm actually now doing a new element of that, Christian. Every 6 months, I'm doing 15-minute check-ins with all of those people. So oftentimes leaders will do skip levels with their direct reports, directs. I'm actually doing the whole organization every 6 months for 15 minutes. And we don't have to spend tons of time, and there's no agenda. It's just, how are you doing? What's new in your world? And people are telling me about, engagements, weddings, dogs, houses, things they're working on. Some people have career things they want to talk about. It's just opening that space, again, to say, you matter. And I want you to know that I know who you are, where you are in the organization, and what you do. Now, I don't know, talk to me in a few years and maybe the teams will be big enough to the size where you just can't possibly do that. But we'll find another way to make that work. It's something I want to always have on my radar.
Yeah. No, this intrinsic motivation kind of is really good, I would say. And also that, let's say, let's have another conversation in a few years and see how you will adapt to the situation.
Right.
Then.
Yeah, right. Yeah. When it's a 500 person or 1,000 person HR organization, I don't know, that might be, well, Christian, I do nothing but one-on-ones all day, every day. So.
Yeah. So when we both also had this 30 minutes, right? I told you about my development plan. I was thinking about and trying to plan it, and then of course also executing on it, right? But please don't ask me how and if I executed it. Let's focus on a different thing.
Very well.
What were you thinking when you said, okay, Christian, because one thing was accountability, right? And you said, okay, Christian, let's review it in 1 month together and see what you were coming up with. What did you think? Why did you say that?
I think that this kind of goes back to this, the question on how are you developing yourself? And I think that one of the things that all of us can work on is accountability. And sometimes the best way I think to show up for our teams is to provide a very life-giving, human-centered sense of accountability. That it's easy enough for you to have said to me, David, this is the goal that I'm going after, this is what I want to do. And for me to say, oh, Christian, that's nice. That's wonderful. It's lovely to hear that. Those are nice words that come out of my mouth. When I say to you, Christian, with your permission, I'd like to help you hold yourself accountable for that progress, and let's set time in a month to meet to talk about that. It does a couple things. First of all, it helps to that person to grow and develop through accountability. But even more importantly, I think it tells you I'm listening, I'm paying attention, I'm invested in this thing that you're trying to do, that you're telling me is important to you, to the point where I'm going to spend my time more with you on that, talking about it, checking in with you. And then for you to know that, hey, I've got 30 days to make progress on this thing because David's going to want to meet and talk about how that thing's going. And so it then helps you achieve that goal that you told me is important to you, versus me just kind of brushing off and saying, oh, that's nice. That would be sort of ruinous empathy, I suppose, if you put it in Kim Scott's language, I think it is, in Radical Candor, that we got to put some wood behind that arrow, as it were, and say, I care, and I'm going to show you. I'm going to invest in that with you, and I'm going to invest in it through helping you with the accountability that you already have, but I'm going to show you how important that is to me.
Yeah. No, that's a great perspective. And maybe let me tell you something. When you said that, right, I wasn't thinking like, okay, David wants to meet in 30 days and review it, right? It was like, LDK wants to review it, so I better work on it. Yeah, but it was, yeah, well spent. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Yeah. And somebody might say, no, actually, I just want to share it with you, and this is my own personal goal, and I'm going to work on it. I think I'm good. And my job then would be to say, okay, great. Yeah, I'm here to help however I can. And then you can leave it at that. The point is still the same of how it hopefully occurs to that person.
Yeah. So you're also an advisor on Forbes HR Council, right? So why did you start this?
I think it goes back to the comment that I made when we opened the conversation today of just, I think organizations and a couple of different organizations and companies that I'm in advisory roles for are along this line as well. They're helping to advance the dialogue in the people space. To say, what are you seeing in the market? What are you challenged by? How are you helping your organization? What are you stuck on? What's stumping you? What do you need help with? And being involved in the ecosystems and the spaces that allow that to happen, that vulnerability, or especially HR leaders to be connecting with each other, to put forward thought leadership and then give feedback and counsel and assistance. I think as many of those sort of personal boards of directors, as you've heard probably called, you can assemble, the better, because they're going to hold you accountable. They're going to be a source of counsel and input and ideas in a way that's going to help you be a better leader. So I think the Forbes Council does that, as do some of these other organizations that I participate in.
Yeah, you already answered with that also another question. So what is it what you gain from this advisoryship, right? Which does have also influence on your own leadership style, but maybe not just a leadership style, maybe with a focus, but also as a person per se.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it does play into those that when I hear ideas from colleagues and other leaders, I get self-reflective. It's like, oh, I haven't been doing that. I hadn't thought about that. Maybe I should do more of that. Or I used to focus on that and I've sort of dropped the ball and I need to pick that back up. So it goes back to this sort of accountability for myself, of making sure that I'm surrounding myself with other people that want to be high performers. That's one piece. On a more tactical level, and any HR person, any HR leader who's listening to this podcast will probably agree with this, that we get asked the question a lot, well, what's everyone else doing? What are the benchmarks? What's industry standard? What's best practice? And that's like the number one question I get from CFOs and CEOs. And being able to say, well, I was talking with some colleagues, last week or last month, or I'll be meeting with someone tomorrow about that topic, I think gives those leaders, especially CEOs and CFOs, the confidence to say, we as a company are not going to be too far outside of the boundaries operationally of where many other companies are. Now, there are sometimes you want to be way out of the boundaries because you're innovating and you're driving product, knowledge and intelligence and all that. That's where you want to be outside of the boundaries. When you're running a company operationally, which is certainly the space that the people organization is in, generally speaking, you want to kind of know where the market is. Because if you're going way high or way low on any factor or way outside of the bounds, you could be over or under investing or over or under spending with where kind of the market standards are. And there are some areas where you may say, look, we want to over index. In previous companies, one of the things that we've over indexed on is family forming benefits, of helping people, expand their families, whether that's through a gestational carrier, surrogacy, adoption, natural birth, whatever it is, helping to families grow. And in some of these smaller companies I've been a part of, I'll introduce those benefits earlier, which I would say is actually quite outside the norm. I tell my colleagues, like, wait a second, you're 1,000 people and you already have this benefit? That's like a Google or a Facebook or a Salesforce level benefit. And I say, yeah, that's important to us. So we're going to actually be out of bounds on that part of our employee experience intentionally and knowing we're doing so. So there are times to color outside the lines. I would say most of the time you want to be relatively inside the lines somewhere, though. So you run your company in a responsible way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, doing this, running a company in a responsible way, in whatever way that also means, right, is, an important thing. So good shout. Maybe last question. So, the 4 Ps, right? Plants, pets, people, and places in their life. In an article in HR Executive, you are quoted with, "The pandemic taught us that to include things like plants, and pets in conversations, these were always important to us. We just hadn't opened ourselves up at work before then." How did you feel when the pandemic hit and you had to adapt? Or didn't you have to adapt?
Yeah, I think it didn't feel too hard to adapt for me. I think partially because in consulting, you are a couple days on the client site, and then you were a couple days working remotely, either from the office or the house, and that was just normal. And so we were used to having virtual meetings and consulting from almost the start of my career. Now, back then, there were no video calls, there were no Hangouts or Zooms or any of that. It was all conference call bridges that you dialed into, and you had a code number and you dialed in. It was all voice, but we did those with some frequency. Many of us were working virtually and remotely with each other, and so that was not a hard shift for me on a personal level. I think I adapted pretty well to it. I will say, at one point though, in the middle of the pandemic, my wife Erin came to me and she said, "Can you please tomorrow put on a different pair of trousers?" And I said, "What?" And she goes, "You have worn that exact same pair of trousers for the last 3 months." and they were getting washed. They weren't dirty. It was just, I got in a routine where I was just kind of putting on the same clothes every day. Maybe my shirt would change, but the trousers were always the same. And it was kind of a funny moment where it's like, yeah, I've gotten into a bit of a groove here on my clothing. That wasn't that hard though. I just chose some different trousers to put on. One thing that did hit me, it's interesting. There was a colleague of mine, his name was James, and we started working, from the house remotely, everybody. And one day he showed me his living room, and somehow the topic of his fish came up. I said, "Oh, you have fish?" He said, "Oh, yeah." And he walked me in, and he had his laptop. He was walking around his house with his laptop, and he had literally turned his living room into like an aquarium, like a desert oasis. Huge plants, this giant pool in the middle with all these big fish in it, like half-meter long fish. They were carp, and they all had names, and there were probably 20 of them in this pond that he had built in his dining room, and he knew all their names. He called them out by name as they were swimming around, and he was so excited to show that to me. And we had a really fun conversation about the plants that he had and his fish. And here I am thinking, this has been that important to him his whole time we've worked together, and I never even knew that about him. And so the pandemic allowed us a new level of professional intimacy with our colleagues that allowed me to get to know James in a new way. And he was so proud to show those to me, and I was really interested. I learned a lot about fish and plants, and I also asked him, what happens if there's a leak? And he was in an apartment building, and he goes, I hadn't thought about that. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, you've got hundreds of gallons of water sitting in your living room, that could leak through. But I'm sure he had some security measures in place for that. But it was cool to see that part of his life, and it was a special honor for him to share that with me. And I felt a lot more connected with him in that way, and was a little, frankly, taken aback by the fact that this was a part of his life I didn't know about, and we had worked together for that long. But the pandemic gave us a chance to kind of overcome some of those hurdles and those gaps in a way that allowed us a little bit more, again, professional intimacy and some safety with each other to expose more of our person to each other. So,
yeah, I mean, because at the end, it's about the people who are the company, kind of, right?
Yeah, absolutely, exactly.
No, but I really like the wording professional intimacy. This is, I think, well put. But maybe we are coming to the end, right? I would say thank you very much for your time, LDK. It was a real pleasure. And before we are closing, over to you for the last few words.
The last few words. Wow. I'm not very, very good with words of wisdom. I will maybe leave your listeners with this. At the end of the day, each day, trying to ask ourselves, how was I of service today? And framing our successes through the lens of others, I think, is no higher calling in any discipline. And I think that those of us who, again, are blessed and honored to be in the people business have that as a great privilege. That every day we get the opportunity to answer that question. Here's how I was of service today to someone, to a person, to an organization, to a company, to a group. And when we can answer that question credibly at the end of the day, I think that's a job well done. And that's the nature of, professional purpose as I frame it. So I'll leave you with that. How have I been of service today?
Thank you, LDK, and hope to see you soon.
My pleasure. Thanks, Christian. Take care.
Bye.